Hello, and welcome to Evidence to Employment, Transition Research in Action, where research meets real life, where the future of work for youth with disabilities is being reimagined. Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Dr. Rachel McDonald Hurford, a researcher and former special education teacher whose work is helping shift how we think about disability, mentorship, and workplace inclusion. We'll unpack what peer mentoring reveals about employer bias, how long-term research can shift policy, and what practical steps families and educators can take to support youth with visual impairments. In this episode, we'll talk about the power of peer mentoring. Whether you're a parent, educator, or a vocational counselor, Rachel offers insights you can act on tomorrow and reflections that might stay with you much longer. Welcome back, Rachel.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, Carolyn.
So let's talk about, for a moment, employer attitudes. Part of your research examines whether working with young people with visual impairments changes workplace stereotypes. What are some of the most persistent misconceptions you're hoping to address?
So this is an important conversation to have because, unfortunately, there are many stereotypes about working with employees who are blind, deafblind, or have low vision. And ableism is a double-edged sword in this way because it cuts off qualified applicants from gainful employment, and it also prevents employers and businesses from accessing their talents in the workplace. Some examples of these type of stereotypes include the employee's ability to perform work, questioning the quantity and quality of work that they can do, worries that accommodations will be expensive and need to be provided by the employer, and concerns about working alongside guide dogs. So in addition to our focus on peer mentors, we will also be examining these employer attitudes prior to and after work-based learning experiences to discover how they may change or stay the same following the work-based learning experience our mentees will engage in.
All right, and you mentioned the term ableism. With those attitudes that you described, is that how that's defined?
Yeah, so it's negative attitudes or, related to a person having a disability, stereotyping, really othering and minimizing the experience of individuals with disabilities. And it is unfortunately prevalent in both employment and education and really almost every area of life.
So your research involves following students for up to 28 months. That's a significant commitment. What are you hoping to capture with that long-term view that a shorter study might miss?
So when we say 28 months, it does sound like a really long time. Most of the work we do with mentees is in that first year. But our study does allow us to examine both short-term and long-term changes and growth. There are other peer mentoring programs out there that are great, but as far as we know, they really aren't empirically looking at high school students, transition age youth in this type of mentoring program. So getting as much information we can about whether it's successful, what happened with these interventions is important because it allows us to do a better job with our program, but it also gives other people the opportunity to look at our outcomes and decide if they want to implement that within their own peer mentoring program or begin a peer mentoring program. So the majority of the studies completed in the first year. It focused closely on the MediaVoice project, which is a form of participatory action research, like I mentioned, I think in our last session, which allows participants to document their own experience through the use of photography or audio recordings. And following the conclusion of the 10-month mentoring program, participants will then complete paid work-based learning experience the summer after that is completed. And then we will connect with the participant 1 year later to find out what their post-secondary and employment outcomes are. And this will allow us to have that full spectrum of outcomes and insights from the study.
That is perfect. That's amazing. This research is happening, I think you had mentioned in our previous session, in partnership with the Virginia Department for the Blind and Vision Impaired. So what does that collaboration bring to the work that wouldn't be possible otherwise?
So the DBVI Mentoring Program partnership with RRTC at VCU has been a really integral aspect of making the first year of the research project a success. So DBVI, in partnership with the RRTC, engaged in a pilot peer mentoring program. So that was 2 years ago. We just began our third iteration of that. And DBVI has provided technical assistance, recruitment support, ongoing consultation for the program since day one. And this is a combination of expertise that I don't believe we could find anywhere else. And the vocational counselors and administrators we've worked with most closely, Felicia Brown Anderson, Megan Hall, Dan Anspaugh, this research study would not have been possible without their support and expertise.
It is the essence of transition, this team that you have built to make this happen. I love it. So for parents listening, whose child has a visual impairment, what's one thing that they should know about supporting their teenagers' transition to adulthood?
So before giving recommendations, I just want to say families have a great deal of expertise to share. And I have found their partnerships in every educational setting I've been in to be really invaluable in the process. But I can highlight a few things. So I think 3 things I'll highlight. So first is the role that technology and assistive technology plays in preparation for both post-secondary education and employment. This is paramount. I cannot in any way, I don't want to underplay the importance of this. This includes disability-targeted technologies such as magnification devices, screen readers, and braille refreshers to devices used by really all transition age youth, such as smartphones and artificial intelligence. We have worked really closely with DBVI to develop technology workshops to prepare both mentors and mentees for the technology they will use in the program and for their future employment and education experience. Unfortunately, the absence or delay in learning to use technology can contribute to future unemployment and even an overall reduced quality of life. So I cannot stress that enough. Second would be promoting independence and a willingness to self-advocate. And that really goes for anybody who interacts with individuals who are blind, deafblind, or have low vision, not just parents, because sometimes we help too much. And in doing so, we prevent individuals and these youth from learning to be independent. Really simple things can be done at home, like doing chores, preparing meals for the family, using the home computer. And this also reinforces what students are being taught in school and in work-based learning experiences. And last, I would really encourage actively engaging your student in hobbies and extracurricular activities, and advocate for inclusion when necessary. And oftentimes families do have to be the one getting in there and insisting that their student have to be involved in something that everyone else is involved in. And these activities can provide skill development, team building skills, as well as the discovery of a hobby that can provide a lifetime of enjoyment. And this is what we call or refer to as disability joy, which is the right of individuals with disabilities to experience fulfillment and connection without societal barriers.
I love that term, disability joy.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Makes me smile.
All right. So what about educators and vocational rehabilitation counselors? What's one practice that they could implement tomorrow that would make a difference for the young people they serve?
Oh, just one. Okay, I'll try to stick to just one. So similar to my suggestions related to families, actively promoting independence, which is the sweet spot, especially for vocational counselors. It's okay for young people to try and fail in school and in a work-based learning experience. That is part of the learning process. They need space to complete work on their own, or they need technical training if they need it to be successful. If students do not know how to use a screen reader or access a learning management system, they will fall behind in their preparation for post-secondary education and employment. In this peer mentoring program, we recognized quickly that our students had a wide variety of technology skills. With participant input, as I mentioned earlier, we created something to kind of capture that experience. DBVI's Director of Technology, Dan Anspaugh, created and delivered tailored technology training to both our mentors and our mentees. And I think last, I would encourage educators and counselors to engage in pre-employment and transition services with their students and clients, which helps, which focuses on a few different things, but in regard to what we're talking about, workplace readiness and self-advocacy training.
And you've mentioned technology for both the importance of technology in both the role of parents and educators and vocational rehabilitation counselors. So would you agree, it is so important that that collaboration occurs, those connections happen early on for students. I know you're working with high school seniors, but it sounds like that you really need to make sure that you're connected with this team of educated VR counselors to make sure that technology is accessible, is available to your students. Would you agree?
I would. And I think that collaboration, that communication, that coordination of services is really important with each member of that team, so that we're not duplicating services, we're not leaving gaps, and we are, really solely focused on the success of that student. We talked a little bit about barriers, particularly in employment and post-secondary education. And, it's not just a one-shot deal. Haben Girma, who's a deafblind lawyer, she's also an author and activist, and she calls ableism like the muckety muck. And I think that's a good way to think of it. And what we mean by that is, you could be doing everything right, and you just keep getting pulled down. And I think the best way to get pulled out is really for that team of people to have your success as their number one priority all the way through. Not doing things for you, but putting you in a position where you can be independent, but also addressing, systemic ableism in society. And that starts with each of us. We need to think about how we can be a part of, how we can not be against what's, individuals who are trying to have that success. I have seen, unfortunately, adults who have been pulled down into that muckety muck. And, that looks like a lot like underemployment, which is, working part-time when you want to work full-time, or, working as a paralegal when you're a lawyer. And there's nothing wrong with being in any of those professions, but you're not really achieving what you have worked so hard for in that situation. I've even seen, vision impaired, friends that I have that are senior level, managers or employees who, struggle to get their basic workplace accommodations. So this is not just a now thing. This is really, we need to look in the future and figure out what our role is. And we've talked about different groups of people, but if there's, other folks listening to this, think about your role that you play in ableism. And I think most importantly, for students, young people, individuals with disabilities, who might be listening, it's okay to ask for help. It doesn't mean that you want people to do things for you. It means that you need to call attention to the fact that your needs are not being met. And even well-meaning people may not be, for example, providing accessibility to you. So kind of really work and learn how to speak up, but don't think that you have to do this all yourself, because a lot of it is about societal barriers, not about individuals, not working hard enough, because we are.
Absolutely. This is a powerful information on self-determination and transition. This is great, Rachel. Thank you. So I got to ask, what keeps you motivated in this work? What gets you up in the morning and excited about this research?
Great question. I think I will answer it both literally and metaphorically, because, sometimes we don't realize what a whole day looks like. And I when you said get up in the morning, it really kind of caught my attention. So what gets me up in the morning is my service dog. So, it is having chronic health issues. It is really hard for me to get out of bed many mornings, and it used to take me a while to do it. I'd have to set my alarm really, really early to, spend an hour getting up and going. But now I've got a service dog who's eagerly waiting breakfast, exercise, training. And so it just gets me motivated like nothing else. And before I know it, I've kind of forgot about what was so difficult about getting up in the first place. So the other thing I wanted to mention of getting up out of bed for the work is that I am super motivated by two things, probably. One, I love to learn, and not just learn, I love to take in information. So I want to suck up all the articles. I want to listen to all the podcasts. I want to talk to the students. It helps my mind open up. It helps me come up with solutions. And it's something that I've enjoyed my whole life. The other thing that motivates me is I'm a disability advocate. Part of the reason that I went to research, from being a dean and administrator in student affairs, was because I really felt like I wasn't doing enough to contribute to the community. And that I felt like research was going to be a really good way to do that, and not research that sort of like isn't a dusty book, on a shelf, but that practitioners are actively using, researchers are actively, building on. And so that's really important to me. And I'm glad I made that decision to transition into this work.
And I think the population all of transition will be glad, because you've made that decision to transition into this work, because this is so important. So finally, if you could have had a conversation with your younger self when you first started as a special education teacher, what would you tell her about the journey ahead?
So I'm going to throw this one out for all our educators listening and say that the first year of teaching is incredibly hard. It is a rewarding work, but I can tell you I really struggled in my first year, not necessarily with the teaching aspect of it, but with exhaustion. So I just at night as a new teacher, you're making lesson plans, in the day you're with students all day, you go home and you kind of do it all over again until you get the hang of it. And I actually was walking down the hall outside of my classroom one day, and I just fell off my feet and didn't pass out, just lost my footing and kind of sat there thinking, oh, this is never going to get easier. And the nurse came out and said, you need to go home. And so I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you have mono. And he said, you've had mono. And I said, thank goodness, because I just thought teaching was this hard. I can go back to work in a couple days and it'll all be fine. And man, it was so much better. But I would tell that young teacher to persevere. Being a teacher is a great way to start your career. Some folks, it's a lifetime career. For others, they move into different areas. For me, I went from doing special education and transition to, administrative work and now research work, also within my field. So I think I would just say persevere and keep going. In that journey. And I think I would probably suggest to my younger self to be a little more ambitious about the things that were really important to me. I wanted to go back to school. I had a master's degree and a teaching license, but I really wanted to get my PhD. And I really wanted to do it at the College of William and Mary. I really loved their program. I loved the campus. And a few years just went by, and I didn't apply because I didn't think I was good enough. And I finally did, and I was accepted. I got a scholarship. I was a graduate assistant, all those things. And that could have happened to me sooner. That's life. But I would say if you have desires towards education, if you have desire toward, a certain type of employment, don't wait. Go ahead and follow that dream. That experience is yours. And, don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it or that it's too hard.
Excellent. Rachel, thank you for sharing your story. I'm sure educators out there, students, teachers, all stakeholders are as well. This has been some wonderful information. So thank you for sharing this with us.
Thank you, Carolyn. And I hope people will reach out if they're interested in some of the things we've talked about, whether just to get more information or to collaborate with us. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. So that wraps up our two-part series with Dr. Rachel McDonald Hurford. From student storytelling to breaking down barriers, her work reminds us that real change doesn't come from quick fixes. It comes from long-term relationships, listening, and the courage to rethink what we thought we knew. So if you're a parent, educator, advocate, or student, we hope you're walking away with new tools and strategies for success. To learn more about Dr. Hurford's peer mentoring research study, visit our website at transition-rr.org. www.vcu-RRTC.org. And thanks for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you next time.
The contents of this podcast were developed under a grant from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research, grant number 90RTEM0014. NIDLR is a center within the Administration for Community Living, Department of Health and Human Services. The contents of this podcast do not necessarily represent the policy of NIDLR, ACL, HHS, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government.